I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the Idaho Student Murders. This is the biggest case on the docket here at Court TV. And this is not the easiest case in the world to prove. It's a case based on circumstantial evidence. Here's more. Ethan, Xana, Maddie, and Kaylee were four friends living together in an off-campus house at the University of Idaho. They worked hard and were all flourishing as students and having the time of their lives. They were popular, and their house was known as a gathering spot for fellow students. All of that tragically changed in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. Those four students were stabbed to death inside their home. The brutal crime shook the community and touched the nation, setting off an intense manhunt for a killer. Students were afraid to be alone on campus. Some never came back. Investigators from the Moscow Police Department joined forces with the Idaho State Police and the FBI, following every lead, every tip, and every piece of evidence. That investigation took them across the country to Pennsylvania and led them to this man, a grad student at a neighboring university in Pullman, Washington. This accused mass killer has denied the allegations and claims to have an alibi. Where was he? What was he doing? And who was he with? We'll search for answers as we investigate the Idaho Student Murders. So, if someone's accused of a murder, and this is a horrific murder, your first defense and best defense is always going to be, well, it couldn't have been me because I was somewhere else. And in this case, they have a good window of time as to when they believe the murders took place. So what exactly is the accused killer's alibi? We took a closer look. The alibi for the accused Idaho student's killer is that while four college students were murdered in the early morning hours, he was out for an innocent joyride. Defense attorneys called their client an avid runner and hiker, claiming he often took drives in the countryside late at night and in the early morning hours to enjoy the moon and stars. The accused killer's filing says that once school started, his hiking decreased and his drives increased. His attorneys plan to present cell phone data and photos of the night sky that show he was in the countryside on several occasions. The defense says their client's cell phone was south of Pullman, Washington, and west of Moscow, Idaho on November 13th, 2022. So they say the car captured on video along the Moscow-Pullman highway near Floyd's cannabis shop could not be his. Floyd's cannabis shop is off State Route 270, the main route into Moscow from Pullman, Washington. His alibi does not confirm or deny that other surveillance videos of the white Elantra in Moscow is him. Here's the state's timeline of the accused killer's movements, outlined in their probable cause affidavit. Prosecutors say his phone pings in Pullman, Washington at 2:42 a.m. at his Washington State University campus apartment. His phone is on the move at 2:44 a.m. A few minutes later, his cell phone stops pinging. Investigators say that could be because the accused killer turned it off. And for the next 2 hours, investigators track his alleged movements using only surveillance video of what they say is his white Elantra. The state alleges that the accused killer drove from the WSU campus to Moscow by way of State Route 270. A claim they support with surveillance of a white Elantra seen heading in the direction of the highway at 2:53 a.m. and a photo of the same car near Floyd's cannabis shop further down the highway. The accused killer claims that it was not him. Cameras caught a white Elantra traveling through Moscow, first on streets near the crime scene, then on the victim's street from 3:39 a.m. to 4:20 a.m. Police say the accused killer turned his phone back on at about 4:48 a.m. near Blaine, Idaho, a rural community in the countryside about 10 to 15 minutes south of Moscow. According to the prosecution, from 4:50 a.m. to 5:26 a.m., his phone travels south towards Genesee, Idaho, going west toward Uniontown, Washington, a route that could lead toward Wawawai Park. The accused killer claims that park was his favorite place and that in the early morning hours of November 13th, he drove there. His alibi does not say when he got home, but the state says at 5:30 a.m. his cell phone uses service in Pullman, Washington. According to prosecutors, that's when he got home, not after an innocent drive, but after committing a quadruple murder.
So that's the accused killer's alibi, but that brings me to our first question. Let's take a look. Does his alibi make any sense? Court TV producer Cody Thomas is on the case and joining us from Washington State. Cody, there you are. Let me ask you, because it's very specific where he said he went. So my question to you is, does his alibi make any sense?
Well, Vinnie, of course, it's up to the court to have a direct answer to that question. But I did go down to his favorite location, Wawawai County Park, and I also went at night to just kind of get a feel of the stargazing vibe that he was going for. It was a long drive. There was a lot of dirt road, several miles of dirt road to get there. Take a look at what this park would have looked like after dark at the entrance gate.
According to Bryan Kohberger's alibi, he says during the window of time that the murders occurred, he was out driving around simply stargazing, specifically ending up right here at what he calls one of his favorite parks in his alibi, Wawawai County Park. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with coming to a public park, you know, doing what you want to do, stargazing included. That's what they're here for people's leisure in the community. But one caveat about this park in particular, it closes once the sun goes down and doesn't reopen until 7 a.m. And if you pan over here to the left, it's gated, and that gate is closed. No cars coming in, no cars coming out. So according to Bryan Kohberger's alibi, he says he was here during the window of time that the murders occurred. Now, we know those murders occurred between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. Now, how is it that he could be out here at those times if this park is closed? Not to say his alibi is untruthful, but it does get a little muddy once you throw that crucial piece of information in here about Wawawai County Park.
And again, Vinnie, that park is about 30 minutes west of Pullman in the opposite direction of Moscow.
So what's the drive like to actually get to that gate? Like, where are you driving? What are you passing? What are you seeing?
I'm not seeing much of anything besides all of these wheat fields that you can see behind me. And at night, it was very dark, as you can see on your screen right there. And I was out there maybe around 9:30 to 10 o'clock. And you can see there aren't many cars out there. There's one passing right here, but maybe 3 out of that entire trip that I took. And once you get off of this main road, you go down 7 to 8 miles of dirt and gravel road with fields on both sides and not much civilization at all. And in fact, at one point, my cell phone dropped signal. Luckily, I was paying attention and figured out how to get back. But after midnight, I don't imagine anyone could pick him up out there. And I find it weird that he was out there at that time in the first place, given what that drive was like.
Now, the darkness would work if you are going stargazing. When you were out in this area, were there any stars out?
Well, I was more so paying attention to the road, but the sky was very wide open, and I would say there's plenty of stars out. But again, I was trying to figure out where to go and make sure that I can make it back home.
And we got a great idea from the video of what we're talking about here. This is not an area where you're going to come across anyone else at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, 3 a.m. It's just not going to happen. But are you passing any businesses? Are you passing any homes, any farms?
Vinnie, you're passing nothing but open fields without barns, without houses, and all essence of the phrase middle of nowhere. That's what this park felt like. I mean, you were just going and it was dark and I had my bright lights on. Then all of a sudden, up to the right, I saw the entrance gate, and I was like, oh, there it is. But before that, you didn't see much of anything on this entire drive.
And I presume there was no one else at the park at that time?
Absolutely not. I was the only one going down that road around 9:30, 10 o'clock. I was the only one coming back off of it.
He also, I believe you said it was a place he would go to run or to hike. And obviously that's what this park is about, right? This is a place where you get in touch with nature. It's way off the beaten path. And I guess it's a place where you can kind of get away. But is it a place you think you'd have to know about to come across?
100% you'd have to know about it because, again, like I said, obviously I was on the main road right here in the clip that you're seeing. But once you get off that main road, close to 10 miles of gravel, no businesses, no buildings, maybe just a couple of power lines running out to maybe there was a building in the park. But again, that gate was closed, so I wasn't able to go in and see what was actually in there at night. But from what I could pick up, you would definitely have to know about it, probably if you were a local or have gone to school out here at WSU or the University of Idaho.
And his alibi is that he's by himself. And how did you feel driving in that area by yourself in the dark, Cody?
I felt like I wanted to get out of there immediately. Of course, I wanted to go see what it was like, try to get a feel of what he was talking about, get a feel of his alibi, see if the stargazing was true. But as soon as I saw what I needed to see, I was out of there ASAP.
All right, Cody Thomas on the case. Thanks so much, Cody. When we come back, we're going to talk about some video that is out on the internet. And the question is this video, is it his Elantra?
And look what time it is, 4:07 and 41 seconds or so. I think he parked at 4:08, all right? And then at 4:08, probably exits the vehicle sometime after that. And then 4:20, it leaves at a high rate of speed.
On the next episode of Accomplice to Murder.
The call came in as a boy not breathing.
Paul was the person who had been carrying out a lot of the punishments that Shonda had chosen to inflict upon Timothy.
At some point, were you instructed to do something with him because he wouldn't wake up?
Put him in an ice bath.
How does a 15-year-old child die as a result of malnutrition?
Accomplice to Murder with Vinnie Politan. Season finale Sunday night, 8/7 Central.
Only on Court TV.
Today.
So we are still looking for all pieces of evidence, but we are still looking for the weapon. And I will say that we have found an Elantra.
The Elantra, the white Elantra, perhaps the most crucial and important piece of evidence in this case in tracking down the suspected killer. They don't have the weapon, but they have this white Elantra. Now, the white Elantra is referenced in the arrest affidavit, and they connect it to the suspect, and it's referred to as the suspect vehicle in other parts of the affidavit. Let me read that to you because I think it's important. Videos obtained from the King Road neighborhood showed multiple sightings of suspect vehicle 1, the Elantra, starting at 3:29 a.m., ending at 4:20 a.m. So they have this window of time. Suspect vehicle 1 makes an initial 3 passes by the 1122 King Road residence and then leave via Walenta Drive. 1122 King, that is the crime scene. Suspect vehicle 1 can be seen entering the area a 4th time at approximately 4:04 a.m. It can be seen driving eastbound on King Road, stopping, turning around in front of 500 Queen Road, and then driving back westbound on King Road. When suspect vehicle 1 is in front of the King Road residence, it appeared to unsuccessfully attempt to park or turn around in the road. The vehicle then continued to the intersection of Queen and King, where it can be seen completing a 3-point turn and then driving eastbound again down Queen Road. Suspect vehicle 1 is next seen departing the area of King Road at approximately 4:20 at a high rate of speed. They are tracking this car via all this surveillance video. Now, there is some surveillance video that's circulating on the internet. This is a still frame from it. You look to the top of the frame, you see the little light there. What car is that? Whose car is that? And the question I have relative to that video is this his Elantra? Joining me to answer this question, host of Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube. Gray Hughes is with us. Gray, thanks so much. I know that you have looked at this timeline, you have studied the evidence, you've studied the videos. Let me ask you the big question, first of all. Is this his Elantra, in your opinion?
I would say 100%.
And why
Why do
you say that? Why do you say 100%?
Well, if you look at it like this white Elantra is moving around, and it matches exactly what law enforcement says in the probable cause document. And then the vehicle parks at 408 near the 1122 King Road residence, and then it leaves at a high rate of speed at 420. Inside of that 12 minutes, all 4 of the victims were murdered. And left at the scene was a knife sheath that had Bryan Kohberger's DNA on it. So that DNA being on the knife sheath makes it absolutely certain in my mind that the white Elantra that was driving around, and by the way, missing a front license plate, as it drove by an A&W just before entering the area, it showed it was missing a front license plate, and in Pennsylvania, you don't need a front license plate, and his vehicle did not have one until he got new plates right after the murders. So there you go.
That's a huge fact.
Absolutely his.
That's a huge fact right there. So let's take a look at this video. Let's start at 3:31:02 a.m. Let's roll that video, and you tell me what you're seeing.
Well, just after it passed the A&W, it enters the area at around 3:30, and then comes back around 500 Queen Road and does its first pass right there. It actually comes around and it goes right by 1122 King Road as it's making its pass around, and then it exits the area. And there might be some question now if it takes a right on Taylor Avenue or left, but it makes the same loop. But it might actually go right based on some audio evidence that's out there.
All right, let's move forward now. 3:38 and 53 seconds. What's happening now?
Well, at this point, it takes off, it leaves the area again, and then comes back, and then enters for the second pass, and then goes right back behind 500 Queen Road again, and then goes back and does the same thing. I think each time he's driving by, he's checking on the status of the house. Don't you think that? Like he's looking to see if the lights are off? Or...
Absolutely. The one thing about that house, depending upon where you are on that road, you get a really good view of the home, and you can see which lights are on in which rooms. And if you're familiar at all with who is in what room, you'll have a good idea when it's a time to go good night. 3:56, 45 seconds is the next piece of video here. What about this video?
Well, that one's interesting because he leaves for quite a bit longer. And there's actually some evidence that's come out recently that he was at that. There's a gas station footage that came out really early on at 3:45, and that likely is actually his vehicle driving quite a bit to the east away, and then he came back, and now he's making his third pass, and I think this is when he notices perhaps that the lights are off in Madison Mogen's room. I actually think Madison Mogen, I think she was the actual target in the room that he was looking at when he was parked.
4:05.
So I think on each pass, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm going to move ahead to 4:05 and 19 seconds. So 4:05, 19 seconds. What's going on now?
Yeah, like at 4:04, it enters the area again, and at 4:05, it comes back in this area, and then it turns around in front of 500 Queen Road, number 52. So right where you see it stop right there, it actually does a 3-point turn also. So it does 2 3-point turns here. So 4:05, it stops and turns around. Now, we don't know exactly why it's doing this. Did he notice something in the front? Because this is around the time that the Uber driver was in the area, right? So maybe he was checking to see what's going on with that. And then he drives, he stops, tries to turn around like you were saying. And then it takes off, and then it does a 3-point turn at Queen and King, probably right around like 4:07-ish, something like that. And then after it does the 3-point turn, it turns around and drives back again behind there. And I think you probably have that clip too, right?
Yeah, we have 4:07 and 21 seconds. Let's take a look at that clip.
Yeah, and so here it comes around for that last time, and it's really going quick. And I think he's made up his mind now. He's going to do what he's going to do. He's got to, he's seen that the lights are off. He knows her lights are off. and he's going to go and he parks the car. So look what time it is right now. It's 4:07, 45 seconds. He's probably going to park at 4:08, and then he gets out of the car and he goes into the house. And I believe he killed them all probably within like a 6 or 7 minute period inside that house. Now, a lot of people think that's not possible, but I've actually made some videos where you literally sit and wait in each of the rooms, and it's really a long time, like 7 minutes. If you just sit there and look at a clock and you have somebody that's in a frenzy, it's easily done. And you've seen other cases that are even worse.
Absolutely.
In a shorter amount of time.
And we understand there had to be at least some level of panic or something going on, because the knife sheath is gone and is left at the scene, becomes, as you pointed out, the most crucial piece of evidence directly linking him to the crime scene. So this didn't go 100% perhaps the way that it was planned, because you would never plan to leave that behind. Now, as we looked at this video, the one thing that is clear, and we have about 20 seconds here, the one thing that is clear, this video is in one location, but they've got camera and surveillance video, prosecutors do, in several locations.
Yeah, 112 King Road. So there's actually 1112 King Road. That's kitty corner there, has a great shot. I actually have a sample image from that house, and it's crystal clear. So when that car is coming around, they can tell it's an Elantra. So they were able to say it's an Elantra. There's a lot of people that say, oh, that's not an Elantra, but they've actually determined it was from that camera, and the one that goes behind there is a different camera. You can't really make it out great, but it fits exactly what the probable cause document said.
Gray Hughes investigates. Thanks so much. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues. I'm Vinnie Politan. As we continue our investigation into the Idaho student murders, as a former prosecutor, I'm always concerned about the lack of evidence. Jurors are demanding, and you've got to prove cases beyond any and all reasonable doubt. So you want as much evidence as possible. So what's happening here in the case of the Idaho student accused killer? It's not going to be the easiest case in the world. Here's more of the story.
4 students were brutally murdered in their home near the University of Idaho. Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana were great people with amazing futures that were taken away by a monster. The man accused of this horrific crime has denied doing it and has proclaimed his innocence. There's no eyewitness, there's no confession, and there is no direct evidence. It's a case that the prosecution has built on circumstantial evidence which they believe is compelling. We'll take a closer look as we continue to investigate the Idaho student murders.
And there are a lot of ways that you attempt to gather the evidence in an investigation and in a case as you try to prosecute someone and build those pieces so you can tell the story and explain to the jury exactly what happened. Well, search warrants are one of the ways that you gather those pieces of evidence. Take a look at the search warrant affidavit from this case. Investigators located a tan leather knife sheath laying on the bed next to, it says Mogan's right side, but it's Maddie Mogan's right side. The sheath was later processed and had K-bar and USMC, United States Marine Corps, and an eagle globe and an anchor insignia stamped on the outside of it. So in the search warrant, they say, yeah, we found a knife sheath, which brings me to my next question. And this is a very important question, which is, where's the knife? Where is the murder weapon? Because you know, in a case where you don't have a murder weapon, what's issue 1 for the defense? Ladies and gentlemen, they don't even have a murder weapon. So let's bring in Court TV producer Cody Thomas, joining us from Washington State tonight. Also with us, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King is here. Cody, let me begin with you. Where is the knife? Where could the knife possibly be?
Well, Vinnie, the first part of that question, we have to remember that the drive from Moscow to Pullman is only about 15 to 20 minutes tops if you go directly to between each city. According to the probable cause affidavit, Kohberger's phone pings on a drive that's well over that, maybe about 45 to 50 minutes, an elongated road home. And I took that drive, and I could probably pick out 100 different places you could hide a knife, especially after midnight. Take a look at this drive.
Now, we are back here on the University of Idaho's campus here in Moscow, in the neighborhood of the King Road house where the crimes took place. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take the drive that police believe Bryan Kohberger took after he committed the crimes that night. Now, remember, he lives in Pullman, Washington, only about a 15 to 20 minute drive away from here in Moscow on SR 270, but his cell phone pings that night place him a little out of the way of what would have been a routine drive on SR 270. So what we're going to do now is go hit some of those key locations listed in the probable cause affidavit and see what that drive would have looked like that night. Now, according to police in that probable cause affidavit, they believe that Bryan Kohberger exited the King Road neighborhood here at the intersection of Conestoga Street and Palouse River Drive. As you can see, a very wide open, very bare street. Now, remember, during the window of the murders, Bryan Kohberger's phone did not ping on any local cell towers. You know, some police believe that he could have had it turned off. It could have been on airplane mode, but it was not pinging on any towers nonetheless. But around 4:48 a.m., it pinged going down this road, Highway 95, going towards Blaine, Idaho. Now, this is south of Moscow and about 32 to 35 minutes away from his apartment in Pullman, and also going in the opposite direction. Now, as we continue down Highway 95 south, the probable cause affidavit says he goes through Blaine, Idaho, and then continues into Genesee, Idaho. That's where his phone was consistent with pinging off of the local towers. And you can see that this is wide open road, plenty of field on both sides of the road, and also to note, no cameras, no street lights, no nothing to pick anything up out here as far as cars going down the road, but I do see a couple cell towers on top of some of these hills as we continue to go. According to the probable cause affidavit, after passing through Genesee, Idaho, he then headed west towards Uniontown, Washington, before heading back up north to Pullman. And Uniontown is where we are arriving right now. And as you can see, still very barren out here. No surveillance cameras. But remember, this part of the investigation was not relying on the surveillance per se just yet, but more so on his cell phone pings out in this area. And keep in mind, we are still over a half hour away of what should have been just a 15 to 20 minute drive from Moscow back to his apartment in Pullman. I just wanted to stop and show you guys a further lay of the land out here. We're headed from Genesee to Uniontown, Washington, where some of his phone pings were picking up on the way back to Pullman. Now, as you can see, this is a dirt gravel road. Not a single car, for as far as you can see, in either direction. And no surveillance cameras, no street lights, ample acres, massive expanses of land. Now remember, we do not have a murder weapon in this case. We don't know where he ditched it, but out here among all this land could definitely be a possibility, especially around 4 a.m. Perhaps the murder weapon could be somewhere out here, along with some of those bloody clothes if he allegedly committed these crimes. We have now, after making that long loop of a drive, we've arrived back to Pullman, Washington on the Washington State University campus. We are now on Stadium Way. This is one of the main strips on campus. It's also one of the main roads mentioned in that probable cause affidavit. It's one of the roads where they say at many intersections, cameras picked up Kohberger's white Elantra as he arrived back here after 5 a.m., somewhere around 5:25, 5:27 a.m. As you can see, it's very busy around here with students walking around on the sidewalks. And we're coming up on one of these intersections here now. So let's see if we see any cameras. And I see 1, 2, 3, I count 4 cameras at this one intersection on each of these traffic posts. Now another intersection right here. There's one camera right up ahead. You can see it standing vertically off of that post, and the one to the left also has a camera on it. So no doubt that some of these cameras, if not all, caught Kohberger in that white Elantra after 5 a.m. coming back from Moscow, Idaho. And here we are now, finally arriving back to those step-toe Village University housing apartments where Bryan Kohberger, the alleged suspect in the Idaho Student Murders, this is where he lived at the time in November of 2022. What was supposed to be a 15 to 20 minute drive turned into about a 50-minute to an hour-long drive on all that barren land, that wide open road space. We know the basis of this investigation was a combination of his cell phone pings along with surveillance footage of that white Elantra, but that all ultimately allowed for police to lock Bryan Kohberger down as a primary suspect back here at the Steptoe Village Apartments, where it all began on Washington State University's campus.
Now, of course, Vinnie, there's no official definitive answer outlined as to why he took the long way home. Perhaps it may coincide with his stargazing alibi, but as for now, we'll have to wait and see.
Mike King, where's the knife? Where's that knife?
Cody did a great job of describing how vast that countryside is there, Vinny. And you know what? I suspect that knife wasn't just disposed of in a really erratic manner once Kohberger, if in fact he's responsible for this, realized that he left the sheath behind. Because that all of a sudden upped the ante on the value of that knife if they were ever to recover it. You can't even find a body in that many square hundreds of miles out there, let alone finding a small knife that probably now is under dirt. It's probably been turned over by a farmer somewhere in a field, and we may never see that thing.
The other part, the clothing, Mike, what are your thoughts there? Like the knife, a little bit smaller, clothing a little bit more difficult to get rid of potentially. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think what we see, if this is the responsible guy, we see that there was a great amount of organization before the homicides occurred. And so, and what generally happens with an inexperienced criminal is that as soon as they break out into the crime spree that they're going through, everything that they plan for goes out the window and they become disorganized. But the idea that he may have pre-configured how he was going to dispose of the clothing. We know there were clothing changes, that it's pretty reasonable, I think, to just theorize that he already had a dumping spot figured out for that, whether it was a dumpster or multiple dumpsters, because we know he's gone east of the residence, he's living west of the residence, he's traveling through all kinds of countryside to the south. And like we've seen in other homicides, Vinny, some suspects in the cases throw pieces out in different locations to try to make it a lot harder. And as they spread that out, it's less noticeable to somebody passing by. A little piece of sock in one garbage can and a sock 5 miles away in another could completely throw people off and never raise this thing to the level of suspicion.
All right, and again, this is some of the evidence that isn't there that worries me as a former prosecutor. Mike King staying with us, Cody Thomas staying with us there. Next question, what was he doing after sunrise?
Surveillance camera inside the grocery store shows Kohberger going inside and buying some unknown items before coming back out and leaving.
One of the most successful true crime TV shows ever.
This is crazy.
Now has a new home on America's original true crime obsession, 48 Hours on Court TV. Coming up next on Court TV. Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Weeknights, 9/8 Central. Only on Court TV.
The Latah County coroners conducted autopsies, and detectives have been provided with the results of those autopsies. We know that the autopsies confirmed the identity of the 4 victims, determined the cause and manner of death as a homicide by stabbing, and determined that it was likely all 4 victims were asleep during the attack. Some of the victims had defensive wounds, and each victim was stabbed multiple times.
So difficult to look at those photos of those young people taken at such an early age. It's incredibly sad, incredibly tragic. And when the story first broke, one of the unusual facts that came out early on is when 911 was first called in this case? Because we know the murders are taking place like 4 o'clock in the morning. So when are they first noticed? I want you to take a listen to Captain Roger Lanier here from the Moscow Police Department and talking about the first call to police.
On the morning of November 13th at 11:58 a.m., a 911 call was placed to the Whitcomb Dispatch Center reporting an unconscious person. The call originated from inside the residence and was made from the phone of one of the surviving roommates. Moscow Police Department officers responded and located 4 victims, 2 on the 2nd floor and 2 on the 3rd floor.
So this is almost at noon before 911 is called. And there was a very strange fact in all of this. But now you look at the timeline. Okay, so we know the investigation begins at noon, but that brings me to my next question, which is about the accused killer. And what was he doing after sunrise? Where was he? Where did he go? What did he do? Let's bring back in Court TV producer Cody Thomas, who is in Pullman, Washington. So what did he do after sunrise, Cody?
Well, Vinny, he made a couple of stops later on that afternoon into the evening, the same day of the killings. He was even caught on camera at one of the locations in person, so there's no doubt about that he was there. But the thing about those locations is that they were almost an hour from Pullman and Moscow. Take a look.
So we're back here at the King Road location. You can see it right here behind me where those murders took place on November 13th, 2022. Now, what's interesting about that day, of course, we know the murders happened between 4 and 5 a.m., but around 9:36 a.m., a few hours after the murders, Bryan Kohberger's phone pings in the area yet again. Now, did he return to the crime scene? We don't know. That has yet to come out. We'll learn those details, of course, during the trial. But he also went to a few more out-of-the-way places of his apartment and this location about 45 minutes away. So we're going to go check some of those places out right now that he went that same day, later that afternoon, after 12:30, going into the evening around 5 p.m. So let's go check some of those places out. Now, according to the probable cause affidavit, surveillance video from this U.S. chef store here in Clarkston, Washington, picked up the white Elantra passing by this Kate's Cup of Joe espresso stand. It's also consistent with where his phone was pinging here in Clarkston at the time. It happened around 12:36, the same day of the murders, and he also showed up at another spot just up the road, also here in Clarkston, which is about 45 minutes away from his apartment and about 50 minutes away from the location on King Road where the murders took place. Around 12:46, the same day of the killings, Kohberger's phone pings right here also in Clarkston near this Albertsons grocery store. And not only does his phone ping, surveillance camera inside the grocery store shows Kohberger going inside and buying some unknown items before coming back out and leaving. Again, this is in Clarkston, Washington, about 45 minutes away from Pullman, where Kohberger lives, at this Albertsons grocery store. The last stop that Kohberger's phone pings was back up in Johnson, Washington, about 36 minutes back up the road north toward Pullman. But the interesting thing about that, it pings around 5:30 p.m. the same day of the killings, but from 5:36 p.m. until 8:30 p.m., his phone stops pinging to the local towers, similarly to how it stopped pinging during the window of time that the murders occurred on the same day. Now, is that suspicious? That, of course, will be left up to the jury to decide during his trial.
And Vinny, one more tidbit about those locations. To get to them, you have to pass over the Snake River. The Snake River separates Idaho from Washington State on the state line. Perhaps that could be home to the murder weapon or those bloody clothes that we've been speaking about.
Yeah, I remember the Snake River Canyon from years ago. You're too young, Cody, but that's where Evel Knievel attempted one of his jumps. Mike King is still with us as well. Mike, what are your thoughts about what the accused killer is doing after sunrise? And let's start with going back towards the scene of the crime, because if he's back there at 9:30 in the morning, there's no police cars. There's no one there because 911 hasn't been called yet.
Exactly, Vinny. And this thing is really interesting when you look at it from the perspective of criminal behavior. If, in fact, this is a predator who has fantasized about committing these murders, planned them out, and then looks for the news to come out and validate his work, and nothing comes out, it's got to be incredibly frustrating, which then prompts him to come out of the lair and drive by the location to figure out, have they even discovered this thing has happened yet? And I think that's really what we're going to find in this trial that comes out clearly, is that drive-by was, number one, to validate that the police are either there or not there investigating it, and to reaffirm this monumental task that the predator feels they accomplished by killing these 4 kids. And it's really frustrating to think about it from that perspective. But then I think your questions are maybe going to go south of here, and I'll add on to that as we go forward.
Well, go ahead, Mike. I'm looking at a couple of the different stops here. You know, I understand the coffee. This could have been an all-nighter for him. Might be getting a little tired. Maybe some of the adrenaline is running out of his body at this moment, and you get a cup of joe. But then the purchase at this Albertsons, I know there are supermarkets much closer to his home.
Exactly, Vinny. And you know what? I think it's going to be really interesting if law enforcement was able to collect a receipt from Kate's. I'd like to know if this guy got a double shot of caffeine on that cup of coffee, because if, in fact, it's him, he was up all night, and he has to be pretty dang tired, regardless of how wired he is emotionally. And, you know, that could keep you going for a long time. But the other purpose of going south wasn't to get a cup of coffee. Albertsons might be just makes perfect sense. Maybe the guy was hungry by that time in the morning, or he needed to stop and use the restroom. 100 reasons that we could come up with why he needed to be in there. And I think that's going to come out if we actually get the full detail of the receipts of what was purchased there. But don't forget that the night before, or the hours before this, right after the murder, during that time when his phone is turned off, it's believed that he's making a couple of trips here and there. And then the phone comes on, and we see him just north of that Lewiston location in 2 different places, that phone pinging. Again, the artist wants to see their artwork. And it might be that he's driving by those locations where he potentially dumped clothing or the knife, or he washed up afterward, and he wants to go by to make sure the law enforcement investigators aren't there, that he hasn't been burned in those specific locations. So it's the bear that's buried its prey going back to make sure that that site is still secure.
That makes so much sense. So much sense. Hey, Cody, I just want to make sure that I'm correct here, because I haven't been out there. You're on the ground. That Albertsons, are there other grocery stores that are closer to his apartment than that one?
Without a doubt. There's Walmart's, there's a Publix, and there's even a Target right next to Washington State University. So there was absolutely no reason to be almost an hour away down in the Snake River Valley.
Yeah, all of this is incredibly suspicious. It's circumstantial. It's not direct evidence, but it's part of the pieces that prosecutors have to put together and then pile up inside that courtroom to try to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. Big thanks to Mike King. Always great to have you. Cody Thomas on the case, doing great work as always. Thanks so much, Cody. Appreciate it. You know, when this case first broke, one of the big concerns that I think a lot of people had, we weren't hearing a lot of information from investigators, and it was a small town operation, right? Moscow, Idaho, small department, kind of in the middle of nowhere, rural. But what they did is they reached out and they got help from the state police and they got help from the FBI. And because of doing that, these prosecutors have been handed real evidence in this case. Things didn't escape this investigation. It was thorough and it was legit. And that's why I think prosecutors will have a great shot. I'm Vinnie Politan. I'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.